The gate is packed. The intercom blares the final call for Flight 402. A single father stands there, holding his young daughter close. The girl coughs softly, exhausted after a grueling connection. Suddenly, the pilot steps out, stops, and looks at them. His voice is ice cold. "You are not getting on this plane." Flight attendants freeze. Every passenger turns to stare. The father asks why, but there is no clear answer. The pilot crosses his arms, cutting him off with a smirk. The man remains silent and takes half a step back. The countdown to the pilot's career begins. Daniel Wright is 40 years old. He is a man who carries the weight of the world on his shoulders, but today his only world is the 7-year-old girl clutching his hand, Sophie. She has just been discharged from a specialized hospital after weeks of treatment for a respiratory condition that had turned their lives upside down. Her eyes are heavy, and her skin is far too translucent, like fine porcelain that might shatter under the fluorescent airport lights. They need to get home. They need their own beds, their own peace, and the safety of a familiar roof. This flight isn't a luxury, it is a desperate necessity. Daniel is dressed simply, almost invisibly, a faded hoodie, worn-out jeans, and an old canvas backpack that has seen better days. He carries no checked luggage. Everything he owns for this trip, Sophie's medicine, a few changes of clothes, and her favorite tattered teddy bear, is strapped to his back or held in his arms. He is the image of a man who has traded everything, including his own comfort, for his daughter's health. What the crowd milling around Gate B12 doesn't know is that Daniel Wright wasn't always just a tired father in a worn hoodie. 3 years ago, he was a high-level specialist in aviation safety and compliance. He was the man who wrote the manuals that pilots across the globe were required to memorize. He was the architect of safety protocols that governed millions of hours of flight time. But when his wife passed away in a tragic accident and Sophie fell ill shortly after, the corporate towers and international conferences lost their meaning. He walked away from the high-stakes world of aviation law and safety to become a full-time caregiver. He chose the quiet, often lonely life of a single father. Today, however, he isn't Director Wright. He is just passenger 14B. The boarding gate finally opens with a sharp electronic chirp. The digital signs flash a vibrant green. The line begins to shuffle forward like a slow metallic snake. Daniel feels Sophie's grip tighten on his hand. She's nervous. The sheer scale of the airport and the roar of engines outside the thick glass windows are overwhelming for a child who has spent months in sterilized hospital rooms. The recycled airport air is dry and dusty, making her cough again, a small, rasping sound that echoes in the quiet gaps between announcements. Daniel kneels down, bringing himself to her eye level. "Almost there, sweetie," he whispers, his voice a steady anchor in the chaotic terminal. "Just a few more hours, and we'll be in our own living room. We'll watch that movie you like, okay?" Sophie nods bravely, though her eyes remain wide and fearful. They reach the podium. The gate agent, a middle-aged woman named Sarah, who looks like she's had a very long shift, scans the ticket. Beep. The light flashes green. She looks at Sophie, her expression softening for a fleeting moment. "Safe travels, little one," she says, offering a sympathetic smile to the tired child. Daniel breathes a sigh of relief. The hardest part, he thinks, is over. But then, the heavy security door near the jetway swings open with a violent bang. Captain Miller steps out. He is the picture of aviation perfection, his uniform pressed so sharply it could cut, his 4 gold bars gleaming under the lights, and his hat perched at a perfect, authoritative angle. He is polished, arrogant, and wearing his authority like a suit of armor. Miller isn't supposed to be doing final checks at the gate. That's usually left to the ground crew. But Miller is a man who thrives on being seen. He likes the power of the uniform. He likes the way people instinctively move out of his way. His eyes scan the remaining line with a predatory sharpness, settling on Daniel's old backpack and Sophie's pale, shivering form. He doesn't ask about their health. He doesn't ask for medical documentation or if they need assistance. He simply stops in the middle of the jetway entrance and points a gloved finger directly at Daniel's chest. "You," Miller says, his voice booming, designed to carry over the murmurs of the crowd and the distant whine of jet engines. "Step out of line. "You're not boarding this aircraft." The world seems to stop. Daniel freezes, his hand still holding Sophie's. He looks at Sarah, the gate agent, who looks just as stunned as he is. He turns back to the pilot, certain there must be some comical misunderstanding. "Excuse me, Captain. Our tickets are valid. We've already been cleared by the agent. Is there an issue with the seating?" Miller doesn't budge an inch. He looks down his nose at Sophie, his eyes flickering with a flash of unexplained disdain. Perhaps he sees her illness as a nuisance, or perhaps he just sees an easy target for his morning power play. "I make the final call on who enters my cabin, and my cabin is currently closed to you. I don't like the look of this. You're a liability, and frankly, you look like you're in no condition to travel. Move aside and let the paying passengers through." The atmosphere at the gate turns from expectant to toxic in a heartbeat. Captain Miller doesn't lower his voice. He deliberately projects it, ensuring every passenger in the terminal can witness this exercise of absolute power. "I said move! You're clogging up the boarding process. You aren't fit for this flight, and I won't have you compromising the comfort of my first-class cabin." Daniel feels a familiar heat rising in his chest, a spark of the old director Wright who could dismantle a failing airline's CEO with a single sentence. But he stays still. He has spent years in boardrooms dealing with outsized egos. He knows that anger is a trap, a justification for the bully to escalate. He looks at Sophie, who is now trembling visibly, her eyes filling with tears. "Captain," Daniel says, his voice low, measured, and dangerously calm, "I'm asking for a specific safety reason. As per airline regulations and the FAA guidelines, a denial of boarding must be based on a credible safety threat or a failure to meet travel requirements. Is there a technical issue? A health protocol violation? Please enlighten me so I can address it." Miller scoffs, a sound of pure arrogance. He doesn't offer a technical explanation because he doesn't have one. He isn't thinking about safety. He's thinking about the fact that he didn't like the way Daniel looked at him when he walked out. He leans in closer, the smell of expensive aftershave and coffee wafting off him, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "I don't need a reason to give you," Miller whispers, though loud enough for the first few rows of passengers to hear. "I am the captain. My word is the law on this aircraft. Maybe if you dressed like you belonged on a flight instead of a homeless shelter, I'd be more inclined to listen. Now get out of the way before I make this a police matter." Sophie begins to cough, a harsh, hacking sound triggered by the cold drafts of the jetway and the sheer stress of the confrontation. Daniel immediately pulls her closer, tucking her head under his chin, shielding her ears from the pilot's harsh tone. The flight attendants standing just inside the jetway exchange worried, frantic glances. They know Miller's reputation. He is a legacy pilot, someone who survived mergers and bankruptcies by being useful but difficult. He is known for these power trips, but this, targeting a sick child and a quiet father, is a new disgusting low. One attendant, a younger woman named Elena, steps forward tentatively. "Captain, perhaps we can check their medical clearance? They have a hospital discharge folder right there. They seem to have everything in order." "I didn't ask for your input, Elena," Miller snaps, spinning around to glare at her. "Go back to the galley and check the ice counts. I handle the gate." He turns back to Daniel, his face reddening. "Final warning, step back, or I'll have security escort you out in zip ties for interfering with flight operations." Daniel looks around. The terminal has gone silent. A passenger a few feet away, a teenager with a bright blue phone, is holding it up, recording the entire exchange. The gate supervisor, a man in a rumpled suit, is running toward them from the service desk, looking flustered and out of his depth. Daniel realizes that arguing with a man who has abandoned logic is like trying to reason with a storm. He looks Miller in the eye, not with the fear Miller expects, but with a chilling, analytical calm that would have made his former colleagues shudder. "I understand," Daniel says, his voice vibrating with an authority that briefly makes Miller blink. "You are making a unilateral decision to deny boarding to a ticketed passenger without citing a specific safety regulation, and you are doing so in direct violation of the Passenger Bill of Rights. You are also refusing to review valid medical documentation." Miller laughs, a dry, mocking sound that grates on the ears. "Call it whatever you want, pal. You can write a letter to the customer service department next week, but right now, you're staying on the ground. Sarah cancel their boarding sequence. The gate agent, Sarah, looks at Daniel with profound apology in her eyes. But she has no power here. A pilot's authority at the gate is nearly absolute in the heat of the moment. With a trembling hand, she taps a key on her terminal. Delete. Daniel slowly reaches into his hoodie pocket. He pulls out a small leather-bound notebook and a professional-grade pen. He doesn't shake. He doesn't shout. He simply writes down the exact time, 8:42 a.m. He records the flight number, UA402. And he looks at the silver wings on Miller's chest, noting the badge number etched into the metal. I need you to officially record this decision in the flight log, Daniel says. His voice is sharp as a scalpel. I want it noted that the captain personally intervened to deny boarding to a minor recently discharged from a hospital. Miller just waves a hand dismissively, already turning his back on them as he walks toward the cockpit, his boots echoing with a self-important thud. Close the doors, he orders the staff without looking back. The heavy magnetic door of the boarding gate swings shut with a loud final thud that feels like a prison gate closing. The jetway retracts. The hum of the terminal returns, but it's different now. It's filled with the indignant whispers of the people who stayed behind. Daniel and Sophie are left standing in the vast, empty space of the gate area, alone, as the rest of the world prepares to fly away. If you believe that staying calm at the right moment can change the entire game, hit that subscribe button now. You don't want to miss the moment the tables start to turn. Daniel doesn't panic. He doesn't slump into a seat in defeat. He leads Sophie to a quiet row of seats near the floor-to-ceiling windows that look out onto the tarmac. He sets his backpack down with practiced ease, gives her a sip of apple juice, and kisses her forehead. Just a little longer, Sophie. Daddy's going to fix this. I promise. He pulls out his smartphone. He doesn't call a lawyer. He doesn't post an angry rant on social media, though he knows the video taken by the teenager will likely be viral by noon. Instead, he opens a browser and navigates to a secure internal portal that he hasn't logged into for exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 4 days. He enters his old credentials. User D_right_alpha_9. Password encrypted. He waits for the two-factor authentication to hit his old tablet, which he still keeps in his bag. The system pulses. It's an emeritus account, granted to former directors with high-level security clearance. To the airline server, it's as if a ghost has just walked back into the room. He begins to type a Priority 1 compliance report. This isn't a customer complaint. This is a code-red safety and regulatory filing that goes directly to the desk of the Senior Vice President of Operations in the FAA's Regional Oversight Office. He attaches the video link from the passenger, which, as he suspected, is already trending under the hashtag #pilotbully. He logs the exact violations with the surgical precision of the man who helped write the very laws being broken. Failure to provide a safety justification, violation of CFR 121.533, violation of passenger rights under Title 14, and failure to follow the Standard Operating Procedures, SOP, for gate disputes. He adds a final note. Captain Miller displayed erratic behavior and personal bias, compromising the integrity of the flight safety culture. He hits send. 10 miles away, in a glass and steel skyscraper that serves as the airline's headquarters, a red light begins to flash on the critical response monitor in the compliance center. This isn't a common occurrence. A Priority 1 report from an alpha-level account triggers an automatic system-wide audit. At the same time, inside the cockpit of Flight 402, Captain Miller is running through the pre-start checklist, his mood buoyed by his victory at the gate. He feels powerful. He feels in control. But then, the flight management system, FMS, chirps, not with a routine weather update, but with a high-pitched, insistent alarm. A message in bright amber text appears on the primary display. The first officer, a younger man named Marcus, who has been quietly fuming about Miller's behavior, reads the text. His eyes widen. He reads it again, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. Captain, Marcus stammers, his voice cracking. We have an immediate ground hold. Dispatch is revoking our pushback clearance. Compliance is demanding an immediate, unannounced audit of our pre-flight boarding log and your personal flight records. Miller looks up from his coffee, his brow furrowing. What? That's impossible. Tell them we're ready for pushback. It's a minor gate delay. We'll make it up in the air. No, sir, Marcus says, his voice gaining a sudden, sharp edge. It's not a request. It's an automatic command halt. Look at the passenger profile of the man you just kicked off. The system just flagged his ID. Miller leans over, his arrogance still shielding him from the truth for one more second. He reads the name, Daniel Wright. He clicks the Personnel History tab. Below it, a history of roles that makes Miller's heart skip a beat. Former Director of Global Safety Standards, Lead Auditor for the FAA Regulatory Committee, author of the 2021 Flight Deck Conduct Manual. The color drains from Miller's face, leaving it as sallow as the old maps in his flight bag. He realizes with a sickening thud in his stomach that he didn't just insult a poor single dad in a hoodie. He insulted the man who literally designed the rules Miller is supposed to live by. He insulted the man who has the private cell phone number of the airline's CEO. The internal system, now fully engaged by the Priority 1 report, begins to pull up Miller's own hidden history. It's like a digital ghost reaching out from the past. 3 previous complaints of excessive use of authority from junior cabin crew. 2 warnings for failing to document safety incidents properly. A reprimand for hostile gate interactions in Chicago 2 years ago that had been buried by a friendly supervisor. It was all there, a hidden trail of arrogance that was now being dragged into the bright, unforgiving light of a formal audit. Back at the gate, the jet bridge hasn't moved an inch. The plane is sitting there, engine silent, like a great beast that has been suddenly paralyzed. Inside the cabin, the passengers are whispering, looking out the windows at the ground crew who have stopped their work and are standing in a huddle, pointing at the cockpit. Suddenly, the gate door, the one that had shut with such finality, swings open again. But it's not to let people off. It's the terminal manager, a man named Henderson, and 2 uniformed airline security officers. They aren't looking for Daniel. They are heading straight for the jetway with a purpose that radiates through the terminal. Inside the cockpit, Miller is shouting into his radio. This is ridiculous. This is a technical glitch. I am the captain of this vessel, and I am authorized to proceed. The terminal manager enters the flight deck without knocking. His face is set in stone, his eyes cold. Not anymore, Miller. You've bypassed 4 major regulatory protocols in the last 20 minutes, and we've just received a direct order from the head of operations. You are being relieved of duty for command instability, effective immediately. Hand over your iPad and step off the aircraft. The cockpit door opens, and for the first time in the history of Flight 402, the passengers witness something they will be talking about for the rest of their lives. Captain Miller, the man who had walked through the terminal like a god, is being escorted off the plane. His head is down. His gold-braided hat is clutched in his hand. The arrogance is gone, replaced by a stunned, hollow silence that seems to radiate from him. He has to walk past the rows of passengers who saw him act like a tyrant only 30 minutes ago. The silence in the cabin is deafening, broken only by the soft click of Miller's boots on the floor. The terminal manager picks up the PA system. His voice is steady but carries a clear note of apology. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for this unusual delay. The airline maintains the highest standards of conduct and safety. Due to a serious violation of company conduct and regulatory procedures, we have appointed First Officer Marcus as the acting captain for this flight, supported by a standby officer arriving now. We will be reopening boarding for 2 very special passengers. The gate agent, Sarah, walks over to Daniel and Sophie. She looks like she wants to cry from sheer relief and vindication. Mr. Wright, Sophie, please follow me. We have cleared everything. The CEO's office has personally authorized your travel. You'll be taking the first 2 seats in first class. It's the least we can do. Daniel stands up. He doesn't cheer. He doesn't gloat. He doesn't even look at the security guards leading Miller away in the distance. He simply picks up his old backpack, checks that Sophie's teddy bear is secure, and lifts his daughter into his arms. As they walk down the jetway, The flight attendants, Elena and the others, are lined up in the galley. They aren't just greeting a passenger. They are showing respect to a man who stood his ground against a bully and won. "I am so sorry, sir," Elena whispers as he passes. "We wanted to say something, but—" Daniel nods kindly. "I know how the hierarchy works, Elena. It's why we have rules. Just make sure the flight logs are accurate this time. Safety depends on the truth, not the uniform." The first officer, Marcus, pops his head out of the cockpit. He is nervous. This is his first unexpected command. But he looks at Daniel with a look of profound gratitude. "Mr. Wright, it's an honor. We'll have you home in no time. I've already requested a direct routing to save 20 minutes. Daniel smiles. "Thank you, Captain Marcus." Fly the plane, not the ego. The boarding door closes. This time, it's a sound of progress, of a machine being operated by people who respect the craft. Sophie snuggles into the large, plush, leather seat of the first-class cabin. She has a warm blanket and a fresh glass of juice. For the first time all day, the tension leaves her face, and she smiles. A real, bright smile that reaches her eyes. "Did we win, Daddy? Did the mean man go away?" Daniel buckles her seatbelt, the click sounding like a period at the end of a long, difficult sentence. He strokes her hair. "No, Sophie, we didn't win a fight. We just made sure the rules worked. We made sure the system did what it was supposed to do." As the plane pushes back from the gate, Daniel looks out the window. He sees a lone, slumped figure standing on the tarmac next to a security vehicle, being led toward the administration building where his license will be surrendered. It's Miller. His career is over before the wheels even leave the ground. 24 hours later, the official internal memo is released across the airline's global network. Captain Miller's license is suspended indefinitely pending a full board review and an FAA inquiry. The airline doesn't just fire him for one incident at a gate. They use Daniel's alpha-level report as the master key to unlock a decade of hidden misconduct. The pilot had built a wall of silence around his behavior through intimidation, but Daniel Wright had the hammer of absolute regulatory knowledge to break it down. The story goes viral. The video taken by the teenager is viewed 50 million times. But Daniel doesn't do interviews. He doesn't accept the talk show invites. He and Sophie are home now. The house is warm, the heater humming a gentle tune, and the air is easy to breathe. Daniel sits at his kitchen table, sipping a cup of Earl Grey tea, looking at a follow-up email from the airline's CEO. It's an apology, followed by a lucrative offer for a consulting role to overhaul their pilot training and power dynamics programs. He looks at the accept button for a long time. Then he looks at the drawing Sophie just finished, a picture of a big silver plane with two happy people in the front. He hits delete. He doesn't want the corporate towers back. He doesn't need the titles. He just wants his daughter to get home safely. Sophie walks into the room, wearing her pajamas and holding her favorite teddy bear. She looks healthier already, the color returning to her cheeks in the comfort of her own home. "Daddy, were you mad at the pilot? He was very loud." Daniel pulls her into a lap, smelling the scent of home and shampoo. He smiles gently, the shadow of the airport long gone. "No, Sophie, I wasn't mad. Anger doesn't fix things. But sometimes when people get too much power, they forget how to be kind. And when they forget how to be kind, they forget how to do their jobs properly. I didn't stop him because I was angry. I chose safety. For you, for me, and for everyone on that plane, because everyone deserves to get home." One sentence, "You can't board," had ended a 30-year career. Because Miller forgot the most important rule of the sky. The higher you fly, the harder you fall if you forget that the people in the seats are the only reason you're in the air. If you believe that power must always come with responsibility, subscribe for more stories like this, and leave a comment below. What would you do if you were treated like Daniel at a public gate? Let's talk about it.